Well, here we are on Tuesday of Holy Week, and we're going to look at a passage of Scripture today as we continue thinking about the events of these last days in the life of Jesus' earthly ministry prior to his death, burial, and resurrection. And we'll see some of the things that he's teaching, some of the things that he's doing, and some of the events around that, hopefully in a light that will help us to think and ponder not only the high cost that Christ was willing to pay for us, but maybe to put ourselves in the mindset of the folks that he was ministering to in those days, and maybe we'll see some things that will help us in our lives to be able to live more in line with what his word teaches us in obedience to his command in our lives. Today we're going to look at the fact that Jesus, as he is approached by the Pharisees and the priests and the scribes, chief priests and elders, I should say, there in the temple, and they begin to ask him a question. We're going to see him rebuke them in a certain way with his response to them to try to challenge them in what they're doing. But let's read the verses first. This is Matthew, of course, 21, beginning in verse 23. And the word says this: "And when he entered the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, 'By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?' Well, Jesus answered them and said, 'I will also ask you a question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, from where did it come? From heaven or from man?' And so they discussed it among themselves, saying, 'If we say from heaven, he will say to us, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from man, we are afraid of the crowd, for they all hold John to be a prophet.' So they answered Jesus, 'We do not know.' And he said to them, 'Well then, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things.'" Now these things that he's referring to, of course, we saw that he had turned over the money changers' tables and was disrupting the process they had in their worship experience, which, as we said yesterday, really became a false worship in a sense, that they worshiped as if they were those fig trees, those trees with leaves on them but no fruit. And so he was reprimanding them about that, and and they see these things that he's doing as he continues to teach in the temple and do things to touch lives of people along the way, and they see all that he's doing. And so they ask him this question as they challenge his authority, and they say, "Who gives you the authority to do these things? By whose authority are you doing these things?" And so Jesus, knowing that the Father had given him all authority to do all that he was doing to this point in his ministry, just reminded them that as he rebuked them, it revealed to them then their lack of understanding what God was really at work doing. You see, Christ came to Jerusalem and he had received the praise and the worship of the people. He cleansed the temple. He taught in the courts. And these actions led then to these religious leaders asking him the question, by what authority? Well, the leaders were questioning Jesus, but Jesus, as he did many times when he saw someone or had someone ask him a question and he knew that they were trying to entrap him by his answer, then he would in turn ask a question to them. And that's exactly what he did here. He said, "Well, let me ask you a question. John the Baptist, his baptism, who gave him the authority to baptize?" And so when they started to ponder that, it says to us that they had no real response. They were afraid to respond, and when they did respond, they reasoned in their minds that if we say from heaven, he's going to say, "Then why didn't you believe in him?" But if we say from man, then we'll have men who will be upset with us. It's kind of like seeing some of those that are in politics in our world today. They will say whatever they need to say in order to keep peace with the people. And so Jesus is calling out for them the real truth of what's going on in their lives. They are not as concerned about the things of God as they are what people think of them. And so we see that happening here, and it reveals to us in this day something that we have to be cautious about in our lives. For so easily we could find ourselves being more concerned about what other people think than what God thinks. We can be more concerned about who sent us on mission. Was it us on behalf of God in ministry, or is it us trying to win the approval of men by, for example, trying to grow a large church? So we have to be careful that we don't fall into this same trap. Basically, we see that as Jesus approached them and he asked them the question and heard their response, they finally said, we don't know. And so Jesus said, well, then I'll not tell you from whom my authority comes. You see, he knew that they knew the answer to the question, but they were not willing to respond to the question because it would put them in a bad light before men. You see, it might have been out of their fear of rejection by people. It could have been their fear of what they might have done to them because the people would be so upset with them. But they understood even in their reasoning that the people sensed that John the Baptist was a prophet of God. And yet here they were not even willing to stand with the people on that. And so they were just afraid that if they took the stand of acknowledging that John was sent from God as the forerunner of the Messiah, that they would be putting themselves in a bad light. And they might not have the popularity that they once had. And so they were willing to say, we don't know. We don't know. They just pleaded the case of literally being an agnostic in that moment. We're not going to reveal that we know, but Jesus knew in their hearts where they were. And just as Jesus does when he challenges us, when he, through the Spirit, convicts us of things in our heart, he's making us come to a point where we'll make a decision. Are we going to stand for God or are we going to stand for men? My prayer for you today, as it is my prayer for me, that when we're approached by the Spirit in our life about where we stand on things, that we would indeed be willing at all times to acknowledge that which is from God and that which is of men. Let's not get caught in this battle of seeking to serve men rather than seeking to serve the God who saved us. I hope you have a blessed day today. May the Lord use you mightily as you stand for him as an ambassador for Christ.